What it is, what it do, cyber world. It is your girl, the one and only, Ash Brown, and this is the Ash Said It Show. Over 1,900 episodes. We are on the road to 2,000 episodes, y'all, since 2014, and it's been an amazing, amazing ride. So thank you all for all of your support, all of your love. Today, our guest is an evolutionary psychologist and professor. She is a distinguished expert on social relationships, dating, and women's health, the wonderful Dr. Sarah E. Hill. Hi, Dr. Hill.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, thank you so much for making time in your schedule. You are a busy lady.
Yes,
we appreciate
that's
that.
a fact.
So, Dr. Hill, before we get into some more current stuff, I wanted to get a little bit of background on you. I mean, so how did you come about in your career path? Did you always want to be a psychologist?
You know, it's really interesting. I'd always been interested in why people do the things that they do. And in particular, especially when I was in college and trying to find my way, of course, one of the things that I was really interested in was sex and relationships, like we all are. And I got interested in psychology because a lot of the research that I had been reading had been looking at these types of questions about sex and relationships and partner choice from the perspective of men. And I didn't think that we really understood that much about women. And that's really kind of what pulled me into the field, is that I wanted to better understand, like, why is it that women prefer the types of things that they do in partners? Why is it that there are different sets of rules for what's appropriate sexual behavior, like what's considered appropriate for women to do and for what men to do. And I really wanted to probe some of those types of questions. And in terms of the specific research topics that we're going to be talking about today, and talking about things like age gap dating, I really got interested in this question just in terms of its sort of fitting in the larger picture of sexual double standards for women. And, you're probably familiar with this. I think we all are. Like, culturally, there's a lot of rules about things that it's okay for men to do, but it's not okay for women to do. And you're like, yeah, I know all about that.
Oh, yeah, we've seen that. I think every woman, there's no woman like anywhere.
We've all been told that, women can't have casual sex. And of course, if men do the exact same thing, we have all sorts of, great things to say about them. But for women, we have all sorts of terrible names that we call them. And I became interested in age gap dating. And specifically this partnership that I've developed with Cougar Life in being able to do to answer research questions about human sexual behavior and sort of what's considered acceptable and not acceptable in terms of relationships. Because when you look at age gap dating, men who date younger women, we don't really reserve predatory language for them. We just call them men. But when women do it, we call them cougars. And it's this, really sort of predatory language. And in fact, when you look at age gap dating where you have men who are older dating younger women, we're again using predatory language, but toward the women, and we call them gold diggers, right? We don't tend to, sort of chastise the men's behavior. And so I really got interested in trying to better understand the sort of cultural dynamics in which these types of double standards exist. And then also, like, how is it that, people are forming relationships despite these types of stigmas that some might exist.
I like that. So for you, as you're in the field, what were some of the ways that you were able to collect data?
Oh, that's a great question. So, when we're looking specifically at the questions related to age gap dating, I've been able to partner with Cougar Life, which is a dating app for women who are dating, looking for younger men and younger men who are looking to date older women. And we have teamed up together and worked with Ipsos, which is a survey company, and we've collected data on, just the American public, and then oversampling people who've actually engaged in age gap relationships to try to better understand what some of the, pluses and minuses are of these relationships. And then also to see whether some of the stereotypes that exist about these relationships are actually substantiated, right? Because we tend to think that, there might be these power dynamics that are unhealthy in age gap relationships. And, we wanted to know, is that true? Is that reflected in reality, or is that just a negative stereotype? And so we went, created a survey, surveyed the American public, and today we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we found.
Now, as you were kind of, sifting through some of the data and the finds, was there any data that surprised you? Something that you were like, you know what, I didn't expect that.
Yeah. I think that the thing that that most surprised me was just how similar these relationships are to any other relationship that you might imagine. I think that sometimes when there's a relationship that tends to be relatively uncommon, and when it comes especially to female-led age gap relationships, we tend to see those less frequently than we tend to see, older men dating younger women.
Right.
And, in some ways we were expecting to see that maybe these kinds of relationships are about something else, maybe there's something about these relationships that makes them different than, just relationships between similarly aged people. And it was really surprising to me to see just how similar the types of intentions that these relationships are born out of, the degree to which they're just based on an organic connection between two people and not based on any sort of specific, sexual kink or desire that way, I thought was really surprising, because what we find is that overwhelmingly, when you ask people about what the basis of this relationship is, it's based on a genuine organic connection between two people where age just didn't get in the way.
I like that. So how much of the research and what you found, how much of it was kind of centered around hormones? Because I know that usually plays a pretty significant part.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so we didn't do any specific digging into that question. But if I am to venture a guess, I would say that, it's a really interesting thing happens when women get older, and that is that as they're beginning to transition into the menopausal transition, and you get the decrease in the female typical sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone, oftentimes what will happen is women's testosterone levels begin to rise. And women actually become a little bit more like men. And which, in some ways could account for the fact that, in these older women who are dating younger men, that you tend to see that they, the types of qualities that they tend to value in their partners tend to look a lot like the types of partner qualities that are valued by heterosexual men. And in particular, seeing things that women are really valuing and prioritizing, things like the physical attractiveness and the sort of sexual spontaneity of their partners to a greater extent than what we tend to see in women who are dating similarly aged partners.
Interesting. Very, very interesting, Dr. Hill, because you know what, I'm one of these single girls that's out there. I've been single for a minute. It's just life has been lifing, and I like my sanity. So until I find, a good match, I'm like, I'm okay with just kind of sitting on the sidelines. I've got enough girlfriends that have all these issues in their relationships, and I'm like, you know what, I think I'm going to get a cat. I think I'm going to get a cat. I think that's a simple fix for it, Dr. Hill. I think that's where I'm at with it now. So that's just
it's really interesting, because I actually just had a conversation with somebody about this very issue, about the growing amount of dissatisfaction and unhappiness with men among heterosexual women. So, women who date men just really feeling disappointed.
Yes.
by the whole thing.
And I'm sure that there's some kind of data in some of your research with some of these women that are just like, they're past the 30 range and they're like, you know what? I just want anything. I just need a man. I just want to. And I've watched and witnessed enough people in my family and women that I've known throughout the years that have settled. Okay, Dr. Hill, they have settled for men that were not even worth just the time of day just to say that they have a man. And I guess for me, I never had the Disney syndrome. I used to love Cinderella and Snow White, and I would watch those movies from beginning to end, but I never once thought in my mind, you know what, I'm going to grow up to find my Prince Charming. I'm going to grow up to find it. No.
Right, and I think that, and that's wonderful. And what the research seems to be showing is that women like you, who are able to not settle, right, and make that decision that there's other ways to be happy, and that they don't have Disney syndrome, which I'm totally stealing that phrase, by the way.
Go right ahead, please do.
That it's that your quality of life and well-being is oftentimes higher than that of women who are feeling like they're having to contort themselves and bend themselves into all these different shapes to try to make themselves work within a relationship that doesn't really fit. And I think that for a lot of women, women and women are what anthropologists call hypergamous. And this is just a fancy word that means that we tend to have a desire to marry somebody who's at least as accomplished as we are, and that we generally want to be involved in a relationship with somebody who's more accomplished than we are. And it's just sort of the way that our mating psychology works. And because women are overachieving and out-achieving and outperforming men in school and in graduation rates and in college attendance and in the career, in the workforce, what we're getting is a lot of women who are facing the decision of being involved with somebody that doesn't make them satisfied because they feel that they're more accomplished than this person is. Or people who are saying, you know what, I don't need to settle. I can just figure out other ways to find happiness and fulfillment in life, and sort of opting out of the mating market. And that's something that a growing number of women are choosing to do.
And I totally, for one, I can understand it, Dr. Hill. I'm living it, and it's just a more enjoyable experience for me. I mean, I have dated basically the same type of guy every time. And that has just ended up in just all kinds of just sheer horror and complete disappointment. And so I'm at a point now, I just turned 40 last year, so I'll be 41 soon. Woo, woo, woo. And
happy birthday.
Thank you. Team Aries. But yeah, so I'm about to be 41, and I feel like so free. I feel so light. I feel so much like there's not like a whole bunch weighed down on me. There were years and years where I was in relationships where you feel semi-responsible for this person, and they're coming to you with all their problems for you to solve it, and then you don't do the stuff that you want to do. You don't get into things that make you happy. So, girl, I've been traveling. I've been a flight attendant 2 times over. I am back in Georgia. Like I'm back in Georgia. I work from home now, full time, and life is amazing. And I never feel the sense of, oh my gosh, I'm missing out. Oh my gosh, I don't have a husband. I'm okay because I'm gonna get a cat. Okay. That's where I'm at, Dr. Hill. And I don't know what it is about 40, but I just stopped caring. I stopped caring about being a certain thing for people, whether it be in my family and my friendships or whatever. And I'm like, look, I'm just choosing me. Point blank, period. I'm choosing me. Whoever wants to be around, great. If you don't, you can go kick rocks somewhere, and we'll keep it moving.
Right, I love it. No, and there's a lot of research that finds that in your age range, and you're younger than I am by a couple of years, but that women in particular really feel less hemmed in by cultural expectations of who they're supposed to be, and and being able to transcend that is incredibly liberating. And I think that, to bring this back to the cougar life research, we see that with these women who date younger men. It's like a lot of them are in their 50s, and they're just saying to hell with it, with the rules about what women are supposed to be doing and not doing, and they're just pursuing these relationships with partners where they, even if they know that this isn't going to, they're not looking for the Cinderella story. They're just looking for somebody to have a lot of fun with, and that's what they do. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of freedom and liberation for women in being able to abandon these cultural expectations for us, and then finding what our own truth and our own happiness is. And for you, it might be a cat.
That's it. I've been working at a shelter on and off for the last couple of years, and we've never, and this is just random me going into my own little spiel, because I didn't know that we were going to do this today, Dr. Hill. I thought we were going to stick to the script, but hey, I'm all about spontaneity. I'm all there. But no, so I've worked with cats before. I've volunteered and stuff, and what interests me the most about cats is that they are so free. They let you know when they want to deal with you, when they want loving, they'll come up and get a rub on you. But then when they don't want to deal with you, they're like, yeah, later, human, I'm done with you. So it's all about that interaction of not constantly trying to please someone, not constantly trying to build someone up, because I did that so much. I did that in the past, and I'm not doing that in the future. Nope. I'm all sold out. Done.
Well, right. And I think that it's like, as women, if we take that energy that we're using to build somebody else up and use that instead to build ourselves up and to build our girlfriends up, who can then in turn build us up. I mean, it's just like so much more reciprocal, and it's so much healthier than having to dump all that into a black hole, into a relationship that miit not even fit.
Not in the least. Okay, I'm going to get back onto script. I'm going to do it right, Dr. Hill. So the Ipsos study, what details can you share with us today about it?
Well, I think that some of the things that we were really interested in with this study was just trying to better understand what are some of the benefits and drawbacks of age gap relationships, and then also whether or not there's any truth to the stereotypes about power asymmetries. Because when people get judgmental about age gap relationships, oftentimes it surrounds the idea of exploitation, right? And the idea that the older partner is somehow exploiting the younger partner. And so we wanted to really probe into that. And some of the things that we found that were particularly noteworthy was, one, when you look at the level of satisfaction within these relationships, it is incredibly high. So what we find is that almost 80% of people who have age gap dating experience, so who've been involved in relationships with somebody who's 10 or more years older or younger, that they report very high levels of relationship satisfaction, which is actually it's higher in many times than what we tend to see in similarly aged relationships. And I think that this has to do with the fact that people generally get into these relationships just because they make them happy. It's not because they're following a script, because there isn't a script about this. It's sort of violating the Cinderella story in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it's just about pursuing what makes you happy. And we see the result of that happiness in the fact that we have such high levels of relationship satisfaction within these partnerships. Also, what I think was really interesting about this is that people's concern, because when you ask people about what the benefits and drawbacks are of dating somebody who's 10 or more years older or younger, what you see in terms of benefits, the benefits of dating somebody younger are generally things like physical attractiveness and sexual stamina. And of course, that's not surprising. And the benefits of dating somebody who's older, the top benefit is their emotional maturity. But when you ask people about the things that they're concerned about dating somebody who's really, who's older or younger than themselves, oftentimes there's a concern about what other people think, right? And again, it's this idea that we all expect that we're supposed to be following this script where we, follow the rules and go out with and or marry somebody who's, 2 to 3 years older or younger than ourselves. And what's cool about this is that we see when you look at this over time, people begin to care less about that and what other people think as they get older. And so what you tend to see is that, when that almost a quarter of people when they're, in their 30s get kind of worried about what other people will think about their relationship if they're involved with somebody who's older or younger. But by the time you get to people who are in their 40s and 50s, less than 10% of people really even care about that at all. Just going to show that people get a little bit more comfortable going after what's important to them as they get older. And I think that we can both attest that that's the fact. I know that in my 40s, I'm definitely a lot less concerned about trying to please other people with my life choices than I was when I was in my 30s.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just so much more freeing. And then, talking about the issue of, the exploitation stereotypes, we were just interested in, who calls the shots? Who picks up the tab? Who is the person who initiates sex most in the relationship when you're in an age gap relationship? And what we tended to find is that when we looked at relationships where there's a 10 or more year age gap, what we found is that most of the time, the older partner, for example, when we asked, if you go out for dinner, who pays? And they said about half the time that it's the older partner who pays. But about half the time, it's something that's split 50-50, which again just goes to show that it's a lot more meritocratic than we probably think.
Yeah.
And in terms of, who initiates sex or intimacy, again, there's a tendency to think that it's this older partner being exploitative to the younger partner. But what we found is that in the majority of cases, that intimacy and sex is initiated equally between the two partners. Again, just going to show that these kinds of relationships are not characterized by exploitation where the older partner is making all the decisions and calling all the shots, but instead power is shared equally between the two partners. And again, this just goes to show that these relationships are oftentimes just like any other relationship. And, it's like most life choices that people make that people disapprove of or have, sort of stereotyped or caricaturized views of are oftentimes when you actually dig into the relationships, they're just really similar to any other. And this is certainly the case with age gap relationships.
Yeah. I can agree to that. Dr. Sarah E. Hill, thank you so much for coming through today. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with you.
No, it was so fun. It was so fun. It was a blast talking to you and getting to hear about your own trials and tribulations in the dating market. It's a jungle out there.
Yeah, it's not the greatest. But I would absolutely love for you to come back on my show. I love your energy that you bring, and I love all the scientific facts that you have as well. So we're going to have to...
I'd love it. I'd love to come back and visit.
Yes, and let everyone know the best way if they want to follow you on social media or if they want to reach out to you in any way.
Yeah, the best way to find me is on Instagram, and my handle is Sarah E. Hill, PhD, and that's Sarah with an H. So Sarah E. Hill, PhD, and you can always DM me, and my email's on there as well. So
sounds like a bet. Dr. Hill, thank you so much. And I appreciate
thank you so much.
Yes, no, definitely. You, like I said, you just rose a fire up in me. I forgot most of the questions I was going to ask you, but that works. I love it. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you so much for your love and support. Keeping in mind, anyone to tell you that you can't do what you want to do, you look them square in the face, you tell them, don't believe me. Just watch. Watch what I do. Watch me make it happen. Watch me make history. That's what we're doing this for, the history books. Social media is nice, but real life is so much better. Until next time, you guys.